That is dedication.
Yeah.
I do have to ask you, how did you stay up so late?
Me?
Yeah.
It wasn't 11 o'clock for me.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Empowered Vegan Lifers. Ella here with my co-host. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, Ella. What's going on?
Oh, what's going on is I dropped Bob off at the vet this morning for his balls to be removed. It's really hard handing an animal you love over to strangers.
It really is. It really is. And especially for such a delicate procedure.
Yeah. But I have to tell you, I've never actually had a cat in my house with their balls intact. And it's interesting conversation, but they seem to get in the way of him using the bathroom. Like they get dirty when he's pooing.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just had never been really, all my cats have always been, of course, rescues. And
right.
So I've just never experienced a cat with balls before. So just an observation. I don't know why I'm telling you that, but there it is.
Well, we love conversations about balls.
Balls and dating, which is the other thing I wanted to mention today. But what about you?
We don't, I mean, everything's good.
Sharon.
I was going to say we don't have any balls around here, but we do.
Yes.
We do have some, we do have some testosterone around here. Not Hemi's. Hemi has no balls, but because he is also a rescue, but and there's no dating either. Well, there is dating too.
Yes, you have dating in your house.
Yes, just not me personally, correct. But my kiddos, lots of dating going on there too.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what's so funny, but
I don't either, but it's funny.
Yeah,
it is funny. It's
good to see your face.
It's good to see you too.
So yes, and I want to talk about this just for a moment because we do have an amazing interview and a guest today, Katrina Fox. But I have decided to kind of get back on, what do they say? Get back on the horse, but I don't ride horses. So
get back on I don't think getting on the wagon is what you mean. Because that means,
yeah, we try to keep people off wagons.
Right.
Yeah, with the dieting. So I don't know what it's called, but it's been a while now since I had my breakup with my last boyfriend, Christian, who's still a friend of mine.
Yeah.
But it's time. So I'm exploring some dating apps, and I want to share my journey. My one concern is if I share too much of my journey, what about the guys, like if I'm dating and they listen, I don't know how much I want to give away. So how can we find that balance, Stephanie?
Well, I think you just have to be direct and say, you've got a podcast and you talk about everything. So if they're not okay with that, they haven't passed the test.
Yeah, I guess, and this is true, but I've never been one to date multiple people at a time. Yeah. Like that confuses me. But I want to be open to it if that so happens to be the case. And not that, I'm very honest with everybody really these days, but it's just sometimes people don't want to know when it comes to that sort of thing. I don't have that much experience. I have a lot of boyfriend experience, but I don't have a lot of dating experience. So this is interesting. And, I'm going on both vegan dating sites and some mainstream dating sites.
Really? Okay.
I am.
Well, that's an interesting little study right there.
Yes.
And where are you meeting more quality people?
Well, I just started and I have two people I'm talking to. One is mainstream, one is not. So it is very interesting because there's just going to be I mean, I don't know. It's going to be very individual. I get that. But one of these is a vegan, one is not. One asked me what what will happen to our pigs on the sanctuary once they get to be full grown.
Well, okay.
However, when I explained what it meant to have a sanctuary, he was very open and thought that that was amazing and loved it and wanted to visit.
You know, what a good experience for you. Not just in the dating realm, but also to have that experience, because I know when you were younger, your idea was if people just knew, and that really was difficult. But now you have somebody that you're talking to who now he knows, and so he's opening his mind. I think that that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, I'm not going to be with somebody longer term who eats animals. It's just not going to happen. I really am seeking that deeper connection. And part of that is that conscious piece of having compassion for all living beings and being able to connect with somebody on that deeper level is really important to me at this point in my life. You know, I had much fewer options. I've been vegan, 26 years. So for many of those years, if I had said I'm only dating vegans, I just simply would not date.
Yeah.
But now we've got more choices. And so I will share, and I am not going to worry about giving too much away because I just have a feeling people will be interested in hearing about it.
Oh yeah, right? Absolutely. I'm interested to hear about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we will have episode 1, or what do we call it? Is this phase 1? What is this? I don't know. We're going to have to get organized around my dating life.
I know, we need a strategy.
Yes, but I know who is queen of strategy.
Here I am, queen of strategy.
That would be you. So counting on you.
I'm here for you.
Okay, awesome. All right, well then you guys have something interesting to look forward to on future, and it will be very much of an experiment and a lot of exploring and yeah, I'm excited. I'm a little excited.
I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get to today's episode, which is with Katrina Fox, who is an award-winning journalist, PR consultant, founder of veganbusinessmedia.com, host of Vegan Business Talk podcast, and author of Vegan Ventures: Start and Grow an Ethical Business, the first global book providing success strategies for aspiring and existing vegan business owners. Oh, we need more Katrinas. She has written extensively for niche and mainstream media for 17 years on animal advocacy and ethical business, and was a regular Forbes contributor for 12 months, specializing in writing about vegan and plant-based businesses. Katrina teaches vegan business owners how to do their own PR and get free media coverage through her signature online course and her group coaching program, Vegans in the Limelight. She is a regular speaker, MC, and panel host at local and international events, ranging from vegan festivals and conferences to book launches and trade shows. She hosted a full day of panel discussions at VegFest UK Trade, the UK's first ever trade show at London's Olympia in 2017. In 2018, she spoke about how to position ethical products and hosted a day of talks at the Naturally Good Expo, Australia's trade show for the natural and organic industry. She also loves glitter, bling, and disco. How badass is that?
So badass.
And cool thing also, I have to mention, it was, I think, 11 o'clock at night when Katrina did this interview with me. That's dedication.
That is dedication.
Yeah.
I do have to ask you, how did you stay up so late?
Me?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't 11 o'clock for me. It was 11 o'clock for her.
Oh yeah, there's time differences in the world. Never mind.
Yeah, I would not. No. I turn into a pumpkin very early.
Yes. And Katrina does not.
And Katrina apparently does not. She's cool. She likes bling and glitter. So, and disco. She better be a night owl.
Right. I cannot wait for this interview and for people to hear this.
Yeah, super, super interesting. You guys get ready, buckle up. Let's do it. Katrina, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm happy to be here, Ella, and looking forward to having a chat.
Yeah. You're joining me from Australia, right?
Yep, Sydney, Australia. I'm originally from the UK, but yeah, I've been living in Sydney for about 20 years now.
What brought you over there?
My partner Tracy wanted to come. She didn't want to grow old in the UK because it's really cold in the winter, and I hadn't really lived abroad, so it sounded like an adventure. So I said yes, and we've stayed here ever since.
I love that. It's a place I have yet to go, but it's definitely at the top of my list.
Nice. So I hope to welcome you someday.
Thank you. Well, I'm really excited to cover so much stuff today. You are an amazing human being with so much history and have done so much work in both animal advocacy and other social justice issues. So I'd love to start, if you don't mind. I know people get tired of telling their vegan story, but do you mind telling us how you came into veganism?
Sure, I'll do the helicopter ride over it, a quick version. So I went vegetarian without knowing what it was when I was 11, when my mum put a beef burger on my plate. It's something we were eating regularly, and I asked her what it was. And when I found out it was made from a cow that was once living, I was really shocked. Then I put two and two together and realized the chicken on Sundays, the roast chicken, was once a live chicken. The fish fingers were made of fish. So I had that realization early on. I just remember saying, at the age of 11, I'm not eating animals anymore. Didn't really understand any words around vegetarianism. So that didn't go down very well, because this was a long time ago.
Wait, what year was this? Do you remember?
Oh, gosh. Well, if I was 11, 1977, I'm showing my age now.
Oh, wow. Because
really good to show our ages.
Awesome.
No problem with that. Yeah. So long time I was living in a working class background in a council flat just outside of kind of South London, in a place called Dartford near Kent. Not very exciting. So yeah, it didn't really go down terribly well, obviously, at that kind of age, but I kind of muddled through. But it actually took me much longer to get to veganism. It was about 1996, I think, and I'd gotten back. I'd done some animal rights activism in the late 80s. Somehow the vegan memo missed me. And I was still vegetarian, obviously, but I was wearing leather, eating cheese. And in 96, I saw an advert in The Big Issue, which is a magazine that homeless people can sell on the streets to make money. They had an ad for this big animal rights demo in a place near Oxford in the UK, against a farm that was breeding kittens for vivisection. And they were organising this whole national demo, and coaches, I think you call them buses in the US, were going to be coming in from all across the country. So I paid my £5 and I joined London Animal Action at the time, it was called, and went on the bus and just really got back into animal activism. And very briefly, I was on the bus, the coach, and I offered the woman next to me a Vegemite and cheese a Marmite and cheese sandwich, which is like a yeast spread. And she said, "Oh no, I'm vegan. I don't eat cheese." And I said, "Oh, it's vegetarian cheese. There's no animal rennet in it." And she said, "Oh no, I'm vegan." I said, "What's that?" And she explained the whole thing about dairy. And I just remember being so shocked because, I'd been involved in the women's movement and feminism, and campaigning for women's reproductive rights, women's autonomy over their own bodies. And so I thought, how did I not know this? So I kind of beat myself up for a little while. I kind of, I was like, I felt guilty. I was like, how could I have not known this? But I was pretty much one of those people that kind of went vegan like that. Of course, it wasn't really that quick. It was quick in some ways, particularly in terms of food, but obviously with other items, and furniture, it took a little while. But I was pretty much like, that's it, I'm on board. And so that was 25 years ago.
Got it. No, I asked the year because I had read that you went vegan in 1996 and I went vegan in 1995. And I was like, we were right at the same time.
Yes. Nice. Wonderful. Love it.
So cool. So cool. Okay. So then how did you get into the whole business side of things?
Yeah, so my background is journalism. So for the past probably a similar amount of time, probably 24 years, I've been working as a journalist in the UK, and then obviously coming to Australia. And in about 2015, I was looking for something, not exactly something else to do, but looking to not just work in straight journalism, because the media landscape is changing so much. And I thought, well, how else can I use my skills? And I'd started to become a little bit interested in entrepreneurialism. And so I started hanging out at those kind of networking meetings. And, when people found out I was a journalist, they were like, oh, how do I pitch to journalists? How do I write press releases? And I thought, oh, okay, maybe this is something I can teach people. So I did, but then I wasn't that excited by some of the clients. And then a friend of mine said, well, who would you love to work with? And I said, oh, vegan business owners. And then it kind of had this light bulb moment. I kind of thought, oh, well, running a vegan business is a form of activism. It's a different type of activism, because we've got to make, being vegan as easy and accessible as possible. So then I had one of those moments, 3:00 in the morning, sat bolt upright thinking, I think I'm going to write a book about how to start and grow a vegan business. And I can interview lots of vegan entrepreneurs and weave their stories through. And then I went back to sleep. And in the morning, I woke up and thought, oh, someone's bound to have done that. The Americans bound to have done it. And nobody had. So I thought, well, that's a sign from the universe. I need to do this. So I basically wrote the book, and that came out in October 2015, September, October 2015. It's still the first, it's always going to be the first book of its kind. It's still, I think, the only one of its kind. It's still very relevant. The content is evergreen, even though there's extra social media platforms now like TikTok and Clubhouse, but the actual strategies and everything, are all very evergreen. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then when I finished the book, I thought, I miss interviewing people, because being a journalist, I love interviewing people. So I started the Vegan Business Talk podcast. And then, just over the years, I've just been kind of working with vegan business owners and entrepreneurs, helping them to raise their profile through consulting, my Vegans in the Limelight online PR program. And I still do some writing. I still do some content marketing writing. I do occasional bit of done for you PR. And then more recently, I started Vivas, which is a global community and media brand for vegan women, driven by compassion, purpose, and a bit of sparkle, because I do like a bit of bling. And that's one thing I do feel is missing in vegan fashion, is lots of glitz and sparkle.
I read that. I love that. I read that on your, I think, Facebook profile. You said sequin-loving vegan disco queen. Yes. Fabulous. Fabulous. Well, I love this idea, and this interests me so much, of different types of activism, because I, like you, started out with a lot of direct activism, with the protests and the leafleting and all of that good stuff, which is super, important in educating the public. But yes, there's so many different ways to help move the needle. And do you have any thoughts on different types of vegan businesses? Any thoughts for people that are just really passionate about veganism and want to start a business, but maybe don't know where to even start thinking about it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and as you mentioned, there are so many different types of activism. So don't let anybody tell you that running a vegan business is not a form of activism. Because when I first wrote the book, I actually had a friend, involved in animal advocacy, and said, oh, why are you stopping activism and going into the business sphere? And I said, are you kidding me? Because we do need to make it as easy as possible, for people to buy vegan products in particular. So I think, for anyone kind of going into it, you have to do your market research. And I think now more than ever, because everybody's getting in on the bandwagon, some of the big companies are getting in on the vegan and plant-based trend. So, you're kind of no longer sort of the only vegan mayonnaise in town kind of thing. So, you have to do your market research. I think constantly look for innovation. And of course, there is space. Even if you look at like the vegan cheese market, for example, if you look at how many dairy cheeses there are, there's plenty of room for, really good, amazing vegan cheese. So I think it's kind of finding a white space is really good, where nobody's quite doing what you're doing. And because then that can give you a bit of a competitive advantage, to get going. But to do your research, obviously capital. You have to kind of learn about certain types of businesses. If you're doing a product-based business, for example, and you're wanting to get into retailers, you've got the whole manufacturing side. So you might be starting small. And I do recommend that, particularly if you're, a small entity to begin with. Maybe you're a solopreneur, go to the markets. If you're making a product, whether it's food or whether it's another kind of product, go try it out on a small scale. So you've got low risk to begin with, and just really educate yourself on how to do that. And I mean, listening to Vegan Business Talk, the podcast, I mean, that's basically a bunch of free training. I mean, every 2 weeks I interview vegan entrepreneurs from across the globe, and they share, their challenges, their strategies for success. Just today, I interviewed someone who told me about a whole new way of freezing food, which actually keeps it really fresh. It's something to do with cryogenics, and also digital demos, which are becoming more popular and can be more sustainable. So, there's so much kind of happening in the space. So I think it is really important to learn about that, learn how to do a business plan. Doesn't have to be a long or fancy document, but just to kind of get something down. Find out, who your target market are, because if you're just going to sell to vegans, you're probably not going to have a huge market. So, you've now got to appeal to flexitarians, as they're called, people who are plant curious some of the time. So really kind of do your research. So obviously start with, Vegan Business Talk, and Vegan Ventures. I know I'm giving a little plug for the book, but it does help you. I mean, that's why I wrote it. It was for people who didn't really have a business background, but really wanted to do this, just to kind of, get that basic education on the ground, start hanging out in vegan professional networks. There are quite a lot online, so you can ask questions and, collaborate with other vegan entrepreneurs. It's a very exciting time to be a vegan business owner at the moment.
It so is. And there's a lot of people listening that maybe aren't interested in starting their own business, but really want to support, other vegan businesses. Now, a couple questions around this. I think there's no like right or wrong here, but for me, I'm really interested in moving the needle faster, right? We're like, as activists, we're like, okay, how can we reduce and eliminate the suffering of animals quickly as possible? So we've got these small businesses that are completely vegan owned that, you maybe are not finding at the regular grocery store and that sort of thing. And then you've got these big corporations that are still serving meat, but now introducing these other foods. However, they might be able to have a bigger reach and affect more flexitarians, like you said, which is a huge number of people, as opposed to our 2 to 3% of the population being vegan. Where would you suggest we kind of put our mindset around when we're making purchases? How do we make the most compassionate choices that also help them move the needle faster? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. It's one that I hear a lot. I've actually written a couple of articles about it, and I think I've discussed it on the podcast as well, because it is something that people are asking. And I think the fact that the question's even being asked is actually really quite exciting, because, as you know, you and I have been vegan a similar amount of time. You're a year ahead of me, 25 years. Back in the day, even just a few years ago, the big companies weren't even remotely interested. They just thought we were a bunch of weirdos that eat strange kind of food. They didn't care about us. So I think the very fact that they are now bringing out their own products and, trying to kind of get in on this, I think that's actually quite exciting. Now, obviously, there are some concerns, when you've got certain companies who, are well known for having really bad, obviously, animal welfare, animal rights, standards, but also, not great on human rights or the environment. And so it can be, a bit of a sticking point. Well, do I buy the vegan version of this big company's product? My view is, look, at the end of the day, if you can afford to buy from, small independent vegan businesses, absolutely. And even if you can't, share them on social media, tell people about them on social media. If you've got a birthday coming up, someone's planning to buy you a gift, request a voucher from one of the vegan businesses. So I think that there's ways that you can absolutely support them. But we've got to remember that, like you said, we're still quite a small portion of the the population. So if we want to get these products into the hands of the masses, they've got to be physically accessible, in stores where they would normally go to, and they've got to be financially accessible, i.e. affordable. And it's interesting. I did an interview for an article with Miyoko Shina about this very topic. And recently, and she came out and she said, why don't we think about it the other way? Because often what we think about is these big companies are using smaller ethical vegan businesses and maybe pushing them out of the market. But she said, no, why don't you flip it on your head? We could be using them in order to get our products into, and use their distribution services and all their infrastructure to get our independent vegan products into, much a broader number of places, like some of the big stores. So I think that's it's a bit of an ethical dilemma that we've got at the moment, and I don't know how it's going to pan out. Obviously, the ideal would be one of two things. One, which I know is optimistic, is that these big companies realize that ethics equal profits, that people want to buy these ethical products, therefore they might become more ethical, or the vegan and the plant-based space will continue to be invested in by impact investors who do genuinely care, and we actually can create a vegan economy. So we're not quite there yet, but we could well be on the way. And in the meantime, I think we have to do as much as we can and the best we can to, spread veganism to the masses, so that it doesn't just become this thing that only a small portion of the population does. So it's very interesting times, and I think we're going to continue to have lots of conversations around the topic.
Yes, absolutely. What about smaller companies that then get bought out by larger companies? How do we as consumers know if they don't change their branding and we're wanting to still support small businesses? How do we know when they've been bought out?
Yeah, look, it's certainly happening, and we've seen quite a lot of that happening, and there's been quite a lot of controversy depending on who's doing the buying out. Really, you just have to, keep your eye on the vegan media, for example, because they usually report on things like that. But other than that, it's just a case of doing your own research. If you're signed up, for example, if you like a particular product, and you're signed up to their newsletter, they may let you know that way. Or if you're following them on social media, for example, typically they will make an announcement about it. It's not going to be necessarily obvious, like you said, unless they completely change the branding, then you might think, or the packaging, and you might think, oh, and then you've got to take the time to look it up and do it, and then you've got to make a judgment call. It's like, if you love that product and it's getting out there, because there's also the argument, if a bigger company has bought it, and even if these bigger companies bring out their own vegan versions, if they see the sales of those go up, then logically, they, may well put money towards those and develop them and phase out some of the animal-based products. So, like I said, it is a bit of a double-edged sword, and, we just have to make the best decisions that we can in any given moment.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And one of the things that I'm really also interested in is helping bring vegans closer together, kind of cut out some of this judging, and between vegans, we're already so small in terms of our population, that uniting us, I feel like, is so important. And there's no perfect vegan, and there's no, there's not really a right or wrong in all these things. There's so many ways to look at it. What are your thoughts on vegans supporting and not supporting other vegans, and how we can help bring those people together?
Yeah, it's a conversation. My other podcast is Conversations with Vegan Women Leaders, and I've been talking to people, some of my guests about that, and discussing those very things, because we're seeing so much divisiveness within the vegan community, particularly now, and I think it's really quite sad. And I think it's difficult, because I know when I first got into animal rights, we all I think a lot of people that get into this kind of advocacy work, you're tending to work from a wound yourself, like you can relate to, the oppression of others. And unless you do the work on that, sometimes you're staying in that place, and you're responding from the reptile part of the brain, which is the fight or flight. Which means you can be quick to anger. You're very stuck in I am right, and you can't see other people's point of view, and it's very, full of emotion. And I think it's important, I think, for all people doing any kind of social justice work to be able to do that work on themselves, to be trained in conscious communication, working through their own stuff, so that we can have conversations where we might absolutely completely disagree with someone, whether it's another vegan or not, and say, look, I totally disagree with you on this subject. However, you've got that. I'm not going to attack you necessarily for it. If you really can't have them in your life, you might want to do the whole unfriending thing. But often I find is look at the whole person, because even if that one thing is something you really, really disagree on, look at the rest of the person, and is it really worth ditching that friendship over that one issue? So I've certainly seen that happening on social, and I'm in terms of me personally, I'm kind of looking at people. I've got friends who are not vegan. I've got one lovely friend who's vegetarian. She drinks a little bit of dairy for kind of spiritual reasons, but she consumes a lot less. But she does incredible things like helping to build schools for girls in Africa. She feeds about 70 homeless women every week out of her own pocket. So do you know what I mean? For me to go, oh, well, you eat dairy, we can't be friends. She's doing way more, on a practical level to help women than I am. So I think sometimes we can get a bit judgy and a bit self-righteous. And when I say we, because I can certainly be that way, certainly have been that way still, and we're all a work in progress. So I think it's just really just a case of, just taking a bit of a deep breath, trying to see another person's point of view, and maybe saying, let's come together on this one thing we do agree on, which is animal advocacy, even if we don't necessarily agree on other topics. But yeah, it's challenging times for sure.
It is really exciting and also challenging. I think one of the things that I've thought a lot about is that sometimes when we turn vegan, tell me if you agree with this, it's like we didn't know what we didn't know. So all of a sudden we find out this thing that we didn't know. And now we think we know, and we know everything at that point. Like we forget that there's still things out there that we don't know sometimes. And I'm completely guilty of this. I started looking into intersectionality recently, and really looking at the different social justice movements and how interrelated they are. And you've been involved in many of these. What are your thoughts on the connection of all of these, and how we can work possibly with other movements as well to move the needle faster?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and you're absolutely right. I can certainly relate to it. I think sometimes, particularly when you've been vegan, for as long as you and I have, and obviously there's people who've been vegan even longer than us, you kind of forget. It's like the moment where I said, I was vegetarian since I was 11. I was doing animal rights demos in the late 80s. Outside, fast food chains, vivisection labs, hanging out with all these animal activists. And like I said, the vegan memo totally missed me. So when I found out, oh my gosh, dairy, I was like, how could I not know that? So I think we kind of have to remember that, these are multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar industries that have been putting out this information. And we're all, guilty of kind of taking that in. But yeah, in terms of, things being linked, for me, I made the connection with dairy and women's right, the rights of female humans and how those are connected. And as well, I've worked, in the LGBTI community as well, I think. And I know Dan Matthews, who's the former vice president of PETA, I think he left recently, he said the same, that, when you see another being suffering, you can have that empathy, and he had it with animals. I did as well. So I think there is a lot of connection, because when we harm one, it harms us all. So, and often we find that the horrible things we're doing to animals, it impacts our health, it impacts the environment. And if the environment is being devastated, that impacts us. So it is all absolutely interconnected. So I think it is really important, if we want to particularly spread veganism outside our, the bubbles that we know. And when I say we, I'm talking about myself as a, white-skinned, cis female who lives in the city and has easy access and a certain level of privilege and easy access to vegan products and food. If we want to get it much further than that, then, you know, we have to take a different approach and make sure that we're meeting people where they're at and listening to other communities about, you know, how we can support them or collaborate or work together. So there's certainly, you know, that the topic is coming up a lot now. There's a lot being discussed. I recently hosted Viva's hosted a panel which Nigel Wright-Brown led, who's an amazing entrepreneur, on bridging the racial divides within veganism. My friend Nivi Jaswal is doing some great stuff. She's got something coming up on Jane Unchained. I won't say too much because it hasn't been revealed yet, but yeah, just these kind of topics are really being discussed, and it's sort of opening people's minds up, which I think is important, because we do want to spread the message of veganism globally, and there's no point in doing it in a way that we think is right and then other people hear it and they just shut down because they can't relate to it. So I think it is really important.
I think we have such a mixed audience. I kind of passed by this earlier, but when you were talking about your realization with dairy and women's rights, some of our audiences may not know yet or understand that connection. Do you mind talking about that?
Oh, yeah, sure. So with dairy, the dairy industry has been telling us for years that, you know, milk comes from happy cows and we're meant to drink it. But actually, logically, the milk from a cow is perfectly formulated for her baby in order to help a calf grow. So if you actually think about it, just logically, it makes no sense. Why would a human of a person, a being of another species, why would you drink another species' milk? That milk is meant for a cow. We steal it. The cows have to be pregnant in order to give milk. Their babies is taken away from them. They bellow with grief. So any mothers listening or watching to this, you know, imagine if your baby was taken away from you, how awful that would be. So there's also in some of the industrial dairy farms, the cows are hooked up to milking machines and they suffer terrible mastitis, really painful mastitis around the udders and everything. So, you know, it's a very cruel industry. It's completely unnatural. You know, we're the only species that drinks the milk of other species, and as adults, which is so, it's so for me, and it's about the hijacking of female reproductive systems. And as someone who's always campaigned for women to have bodily autonomy, that I think that's where the connection really is. And it's certainly kind of, you know, shook me when I made that connection. So yeah, I hope that's kind of explained it.
Yeah. I think once you kind of take a step back and see it for what it is, it's like, oh yeah, but we're so programmed, and society like teaches us, you know, what they want us to know so that we can continue buying milk, and it's
exactly
crazy.
And you know, I don't want to pit it as us and them. And I've said the dairy industry, I'm talking about the industry being cruel. Right. I'm not attacking individual farmers, because they're as much caught up in the system as anyone else. And I think sometimes the media can sort of pit, you know, kind of animal activists versus, you know, farmers kind of thing. Whereas I think really what we're trying to do is say, look, this is unsustainable. It's not good for the animals. It's not good for people. How can we work together to actually help you come out of these industries and into ones that are profitable, so you can support your families, etc., but in a much better way, a much more sustainable and kind way.
That's so true. If we can just step into their shoes and say, what are they wanting? They're not wanting to harm animals.
Exactly.
They're wanting to survive and feed their families and have a happy life. So if we can say, okay, well, how can we help them get that without harming animals, and step kind of into their side? We're only 2% of the population. We've got to not pin it against each other. So I think
exactly.
Such a powerful point. Do you have any particular stories from the book that you know, we might, one that like as an example that we might want to hear about?
Oh gosh, it's been a while since I've read the book, but I guess for me, one of the ones that jumps out, and he's actually written his own autobiography, is Seth Tibbott, who's the founder of Tofurkey. And what I really found inspiring about his story is that he started a tempeh business, and it didn't go well at all for many, many years, to the point where he lived in a tree house to save money on bills. But he kept going year on year because he just felt so passionate about it. And then I think it was the mid-90s, around that sort of time in the 90s, that they had the idea to do Tofurkey, and they made fun of the brand. They kind of did an advert saying, have you seen a Tofurkey in the wild? What does it look like? And what Seth said is, so there's two things. One is the resilience of, like, just sticking in, hanging on in there. But the other one was, he said, he never felt comfortable in like a suit and a tie. And you often think, if you're in business, you've got to be kind of quite sensible. And, he just kind of was happy in his sort of colourful hippie clothes and hats and just being fun, and that kind of rubbed off into the brand, and that's part of what made Tofurkey such a big success. And of course it's gone from strength to strength today. So that's one I think that does kind of really jump out at me, and I recommend reading Seth's autobiography as well, in which he goes into more details about his fascinating journey.
That's so cool. I remember having Tofurkey, when it first came out, and I was so excited to have something else at Thanksgiving, and so cool. So cool. All right. Well, I know you've got a lot. I know it's late for you. I don't know how you're staying up this late.
That's all right. I'm more of a night owl than an early bird.
Good. Do you mind if we do a little sprint round and just the first thing that comes to mind? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I like to end with this. Okay. What's one food you could, or maybe you do, eat every day for the rest of your life?
My homemade raw strawberry ice cream, which is literally just frozen bananas, frozen strawberries or raspberries in the blender, freeze them. That's it. I love them. I hate it if I miscalculated and I miss a day. I'm like, oh my God.
Amazing.
And it's super healthy too.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Tofu, tempeh, or neither?
Oh. I'd probably say tofu. I've heard tempeh is better for you, but I found it a little bit bland. But when I say tofu, it depends whether it's cooked. So it's meant to be rapid round, isn't it? Depends how it's cooked. I tend to like smoked tofu because on its own, but I don't really cook. So if other people have made tofu for me, like in a dish and one of my ready meals that I get, I do quite like tofu. So probably tofu, but it does depend on how it's served.
Understood. Fair enough. What non-human animal do you share the most qualities with, if you had to pick one?
Oh, probably a cat. Yeah, cat.
Okay, now I have to know why.
Well, I think it's probably best for my partner to answer that. I can be a bit of a princess sometimes. Like I sort of, like I don't really make food, so I love it when other people make food for me. And and she'll tickle me. So if we're sitting out chilling out, I like to be tickled and stroked. So she often says you're very like a cat. So there you go.
I love that. I'm a cat person too, so I get it. Two more. What's a random talent or a quirk that you have that maybe most people don't know?
Gosh, that's an interesting one. I ask people this on one of my shows. What's one thing most people don't know about you? A random talent most people don't know. I don't know that most people... No, I mean, I used to do stand-up comedy years ago. I did stand-up character comedy as a character called Kitty Minge, and I did a show called Good Time Girl in a Big Bad World. So I guess that's a talent. I don't know that I do it now, but I can't think of anything that most people wouldn't know about, because I do tend to share quite a lot. I'm a bit of an open book on social.
Oh, that's so great about the stand-up. That's so cool. Okay, last one. You have one wish that will be granted tomorrow. What is that wish?
A vegan world.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
I know. It's a bit cliche, I know, but I'm just like, it is. It's there.
It's the first thing that pops up,
It
right?
is. It really is. Yeah. It really is. Because it helps everyone. Like, I think a vegan world, just because of how it operates, it can help everyone, people, animals, and planet.
Absolutely. Well, especially now we're in this crisis that's affecting everybody, our climate crisis. Oh, Katrina, thank you so much. We're going to put all the links to your amazing book and your podcasts and your membership with Vivas and one-on-one consultations. We're going to put all of that in the show notes. You're amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Ella. It's been lovely. You asked some fabulous questions, really insightful questions, and I've really enjoyed it. Definitely worth staying up for. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate you having me on your show.